A report by a media analysis watchdog says big tech platforms are censoring criticism of President Joe Biden. The Media Research Center in Virginia says criticisms of Biden were censored more than 640 times over the past 2 years. About a fourth of the censored content involved the New York Post reports about the president's son, Hunter Biden, and his alleged corrupt business dealings. Twitter blocked the circulation of the story, and other news outlets casted doubt on the truthfulness of the developments. The Media Research Center says pro-Biden censorship started during his presidential campaign and continues up until today. Since the suppression of this story, many outlets, including the New York Times and Washington Post, have since acknowledged the story's legitimacy. The effects social media can have on politics are powerful, profound, and long-lasting. This is apparent from the 2020 election, as former President Trump is still banned from Facebook and Twitter. Messages can be suppressed or allowed to go viral at the command of an algorithm. Our next guest is former Deputy White House Press Secretary and 2020 Trump campaign Press Secretary Hogan Gidley. Hogan Gidley, thank you so much for joining us in the Capitol Report.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time.
Hogan, for those who might not be locked into the Musk purchase of Twitter, I'm sure we have quite a few viewers who are not all that active on social media. What do you make of it, and how big of a deal is it?
Look, I think it's a huge deal, and it can't be overstated. Twitter's influence on news that we see, information that we hear about, because Twitter is basically controlled, of course, by the left, but for the most part, those who are most active. I saw a statistic in which it stated 80% of the activity on Twitter is done by 10% of the users, and that 10% is made up of members of the media, folks from Hollywood, and of course elected officials. That's important because most of those institutions are controlled by the left. And so when that information gets out there on the platform, what you're seeing is in unison, lockstep ideology of one side of an issue. And so other news outlets around the world, around this country for sure, get that information and drive that narrative unfettered, unchallenged by anybody else, because it is said all together in one voice on the Twitter platform. That's problematic for a myriad of reasons, but when Elon Musk decided to buy Twitter, what he has now done is opened up that town square, as he called it, to more voices.
We have the midterm elections approaching. You are part of the Trump administration as well as the Trump campaign. How important was social media, say, especially Twitter, from the perspective of elections?
Extremely important. Again, can't be overstated. Look, go back and look at the Hunter Biden laptop, for example. Mostly, I would say censorship or bias kind of rears its head in two ways. What you cover and how you cover it. So you go back and look at the Hunter Biden laptop situation. We couldn't tweet about it at the campaign. We couldn't talk about it in our direct messaging. We sure couldn't do ads on it. Even though we had ads, they wouldn't run the ads because they collectively said it was Russian disinformation. Now, let's be clear. When I worked in the White House for 4 years under Donald Trump, consistently, the media would come out using shadowy sources or unnamed sources inside the Pentagon, inside the DOJ, inside the FBI and the CIA. You're telling me the media couldn't make one simple phone call to find out if the Hunter Biden laptop was real or not? Of course they could. They didn't do it because they didn't want to know, or they didn't want to have to report the fact that Hunter Biden had business dealings all over the world and had been profiting off of his father's name for quite some time. Now, in and of itself, you would say that may not be a big deal, but look at the global foes we face right now. We're dealing with China, we're dealing with Russia, we're dealing with Ukraine, all of whom gave Hunter Biden millions and millions of dollars in payments. Where did that money go? Who did it go to? Emails on that laptop, verified at the time, mind you, 17 months ago, proved that 10% went back to the big guy. They even used the code name that the Secret Service used for him, Celtic, to talk about Joe Biden getting some of this money. Now we found out that so much of Hunter Biden's business dealings and the people he worked with actually made 19 visits to the White House. I don't know how many people in your listening, viewing audience have been to the White House, once, much less 19 times. So I'm not exactly sure what they were talking about. But either way, these are serious questions the American people should know about.
President Trump was working on his own social media platform in response to this censorship. What do you think this liberating of Twitter means for Trump's Truth Social?
Well, it looks like right now Trump has said he's not going to get back onto Twitter. I had dinner with him a couple of weeks ago at Mar-a-Lago. We had a great conversation. I'll keep most of that, of course, private on this interview. But look, I think he's moving forward with new avenues, new ways to communicate directly with the American people. That's what Donald Trump did on Facebook and on Twitter that infuriated the left so much. He didn't need the filter of the mainstream media. He didn't need an anchor to tell you as an American what he was thinking. He just told you himself with the touch of a button on a social media platform. So now that he's opened his own Truth Social, and it is moving aggressively across this country to really get up its usage. Also, people are signing up like crazy, outpacing metrics of Twitter, of course. So I think it's a really good avenue for him to take. And one more thing I'll say about it is, turns out all the things Donald Trump was talking about ended up being true. So all the things he was saying, they weren't conspiracy theories, they were spoiler alerts.
Hogan Gidley, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken testified after coming back from Ukraine. What's next in our response to Russia and Ukraine, and what's he foreshadowing about Biden's strategy toward China? NTD's Iris Tao has more.
People eating outside, sitting on benches. It was right in front of us. The Ukrainians have won the battle for Kyiv.
Making his first public appearance after his weekend trip to Kyiv, Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Tuesday testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Would President Biden be open to accepting Ukraine as an unaligned, neutral nation?
We, Senator, are not going to be more Ukrainian than the Ukrainians. These are decisions for them to make.
That said, Blinken is calling on Congress to approve more aid for Ukraine. He said is to ensure both
Russia's war in Ukraine is a strategic failure for the Kremlin and serves as a powerful lesson to those who might consider following its path.
While Blinken did not name who those tempted countries might be, some senators are making it clear.
This all relates in a very real way with U.S. response to China's ambitions, the most important challenge facing the United States today. We started too late in providing security assistance to Ukraine. We cannot make the same mistake with Taiwan.
The Secretary of State also noted that European countries are developing a, quote, deep skepticism over China's response to the war.
China is paying a reputational cost to be charitable about it, sitting on the fence, never mind falling on the Russian side.
In addition, Blinken said he will publicly address a national security strategy specifically toward China in the coming weeks. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Attorney General Merrick Garland said that no interference will be allowed into the Department of Justice's investigation into President Biden's son, Hunter.
There will not be interference of any political or improper kind.
The president's already told his subordinates, clearly, that these are people that he can fire at will, that he and his family did nothing wrong. How can the American people be confident that his administration is conducting a serious investigation?
Because we put the investigation in the hands of a Trump appointee from the previous administration, who's the United States Attorney for the District of Delaware, and because you have me as the Attorney General who is committed to the independence of the Justice Department from any influence from the White House in criminal matters.
In a hearing before the Senate Appropriations Committee today, Garland declined to say whether the department has or is considering appointing a special counsel, though he noted that special counsels are also employees of the Justice Department. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom released its 2022 annual report. It recommends to the State Department 15 countries of particular concern for the worst human rights violations, and 12 countries have been put on a special watch list. It was the first time in 20 years that Afghanistan made the list. After the United States withdrew from Afghanistan, religious minorities, including Christians, have become particularly vulnerable under Taliban rule. Christians are also vulnerable in Nigeria. Last year, the Biden administration removed Nigeria as a country of particular concern.
That's actually the first time that's ever happened, where you've had a country at that level of designation being removed completely, not downgraded.
Communist China has remained on the list for 2 decades.
So number one recommendation that we would make is to recognize that CCP is a threat to religious freedom in China.
Turkel said that Falun Gong practitioners were particularly vulnerable as the communist regime has been subjecting them to state-run live forced organ harvesting. The famous Washington Crossing the Delaware painting is coming up for auction next month. It's estimated to cost about $20 million. This painting is one of the most iconic works of American culture. It depicts Christmas night in 1776, when General George Washington led troops across the Delaware River to surprise the British hiding on the other side. The painting up for sale is a smaller version of the one in the Met in New York City. This one hung in the White House from the 1970s to 2014.